Today. So welcome, it's lesson 10 of COMP2084. We've got 3 more lessons after today. Yes, that would definitely be a great thing to look forward to, for sure. So what we're going to do today is look at doing checkout and integrating the Stripe payment gateway. So typically when we accept credit card payments on web applications, we need to use some sort of third-party service that can authorize the credit cards, make sure the cards are valid, make sure that the credit card has enough room to support the charge, and actually process the card on the credit card and send us back a response. So there are a number of different payment gateway services available. We're going to use one of the world's most popular ones, which is called Stripe. And we're going to use Stripe. You can do whatever you like. You can set up any form of payment you like. The benefit of using something like Stripe is if you only use Google Pay on a web application, well, what happens if your customer doesn't have a Google account? Or if you use Apple Pay, what happens if they don't have an Apple account? So the idea of Stripe is it's just dealing with credit cards. So it's going to appeal, it's going to be available to a broader audience. You can use Google Pay or Apple Pay, but you have to set them both up. So it's twice the amount of work in terms of setting those things up. So we're going to set up the Stripe payment gateway. We're going to use their API in our shopping cart. So we're using it because it's easy, because it's popular, and because it has great documentation for how to integrate Stripe into multiple types of applications. So we'll have a look at the documentation and we'll see all of the different language supports. And of course, one of them is .NET. So a lot of the code that we need, we can actually literally copy and paste from the Stripe documentation. Once we've completed our payment, we're going to generate an orders controller, and that's going to allow us to easily create an order confirmation page, as well as create an order history list. So when a customer creates an order and comes back and logs into the site, they can see a history of all of their orders and then click details to view the full order description. So I did send you an email, at least I tried. I think the Blackboard announcements were not, the Blackboard email system was down. So we are going to need to sign up for Stripe. Stripe also has a free sandbox. So that means we can actually send payments to like a testing area in Stripe, and we don't have to use a real credit card number or actually incur actual charges. So there's 2 links you're going to need in the week 10 folder. The link to sign up. So if you haven't created an account, I want you to go there right now and create a free account for yourself. It will send you an email verification that you'll need to click on in order to activate it. And then we can also open up this link and have a look at the documents that kind of describe what does this integration look like. So we're going to do this together today. I'm imagining our lesson shouldn't be too long because a lot of the code is coming right from Stripe. There's also no quiz this week. So we've had 8 quizzes so far. We're going to have 2 more. Sorry, this says after lessons 10. I should update that. Oops. So our quizzes are going to be after lessons. We'll have a quiz after next week's class and then after lesson 13. Got my weeks mixed up. So there's no homework, nothing to do for grades. I will give out assignment 2, part 2 next week, but really isn't going to make sense. You're not going to be able to start on it until after next week's lesson. So between this week and next week, the only thing you have to do is Stripe integration in your shopping cart. So I'm going to click on this second link, the Checkout Integration Builder. We can have a little look at the documentation to get a bit of an overview of how it works. So we've got a couple choices for the front end and then several choices for the back end. So if we were building our front end with React, they give us that, but we're really interested in the HTML version. So it'll give us some sort of preview screen that looks kind of like this. And it actually gives us the HTML that we need. So it's going to call this JavaScript that lives at js.stripe.com/v3. And we're going to have to use this JavaScript that basically, so there's a checkout button here on our page. And this JavaScript basically calls the click event of our checkout button. And that will call the create session method in the Stripe API. We'll also have to use our API keys. You'll generate those. We'll look in the Stripe dashboard in a minute to see where those keys are. So that's kind of the client side. And then on the back end, it gives us all these different languages we can use. So obviously we're interested in the .NET integration. So it kind of walks us through it. So we're going to have to install the Stripe.NET NuGet package, which we'll do. We've got to create a checkout session. And the code, the C#, so the method we need, looks a lot like what's here on my screen. So it's an HTTP post method. We're going to modify it a bit. We're going to say we're paying with a credit card. We can create the line items in the order. How much is the order? What currency it's in? And then we set up the redirect URL. So a little different from Google Login, where we have to specify the URLs in the API. Here we do it right in the code. So where does Stripe send the user back to after a successful payment? So that actually goes right in our C# code. That we'll put that in. Okay. So most of the code we need is here. We'll modify it a little bit, but this is most of what we need. So it's not tons of code today for the payment integration. So let's open up our video game store and get it running. So I'll start without debugging. So here's our site as we left off last week. So we could shop. We can buy a game for Liam's birthday. I'll just log in with my Google account. So this is where we got to last week. We created a payment view. Actually, I don't think we did create a view. So we can get to here, but now we're locked. So before we set up our payment view, we want to start to configure our application to use Stripe. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into the Stripe dashboard at dashboard.stripe.com. If you just registered, you're probably logged in there already. So here's what we see in the dashboard, and most payment gateways will show you something similar. They show you kind of some reports about sales. So this was a test I was pulling through yesterday. I was just preparing the lesson. You'll notice the viewing test data is activated. So none of these are real credit card charges, they're all fake. And if I go into my settings, Sorry, it's not in my settings. I'm going to go, let's see. I'm going to go to developers. Maybe it's here. Yeah, so under developers, I've then got a sublink for API keys. So Stripe has two keys, just like all the other API services we use, like we used Google and Microsoft. So the name, Stripe doesn't call their keys client ID and client secret. Stripe calls them publishable key and secret key. No problem, welcome. So our publishable key, this key is public. It's got to go in our HTML form. So users will actually be able to see that value in the source of our page. Whereas the secret key is used in our C# code on the server. So we need to put both of these keys in our app settings.json. So I'm going to go there now. And in my app settings, at the end of line 12, I'm going to add a comma. And then I'm going to add a new section, which I'll call Stripe. And in here, I'm going to create two keys. My publishable key, which for now I'll just add as an empty string, and my secret key. So I've just added this section after the allowed hosts, but before my final curly bracket. Just paste it in the chat. So now I'm going to go to my Stripe dashboard and I'm going to copy my publishable key and my secret key values into app settings.json. Go to your dashboard. I'm going to copy the publishable key. So it starts with PK underscore, and then it's test because our store is not active, right? We're in the testing, the sandbox area where we can play without breaking things. So I'll paste my publishable key in here. And then I need to go and grab my secret key. Not that one, Justin, just the one that's called app settings.json only. So I'll click reveal test key. It's going to start with SK test. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but don't worry about it. We don't need to modify it. I'm going to copy the secret key and paste that value in here. So these two values tell Stripe when we send a payment which Stripe account there are, because there's millions of businesses that have Stripe accounts. So this will connect the payments to our store. So copy and paste your keys into the app settings.json file. Well, the other thing you can do if you want, Diana, is you could store like you did with the API keys. If you prefer, you can use the secret store. And then you would also need to set them in the Azure configuration. So you could do that if you want to use Package Manager Console and set it as a secret, that's fine. Good question. Thank you. So our next step is we need to install the Stripe package. So there's two ways you can do it. I'll show you both ways. The easiest way is if you go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and choose Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. We can just search through the GUI tool. So I'll click. So this currently shows us what packages we already have installed. if I click on Browse, I can search for Stripe.net. So this is the Stripe library for .NET, version 39. So you can install it this way. You can just click on it, choose the project, and click Install. We could also install it from Package Manager console. It's the same, does the same thing. If I go to my console, I could also install it with a command. So your other option is just type install-package stripe.net. It's not case sensitive. So either one of these is going to add the package to our project. So I'll just click the install button here. It's going to download the library from the NuGet Package Manager repository, and it's going to install the Stripe library for .NET in our project. Right, so now I get a little green arrow here telling me this version is installed. And if I now click my Installed tab, now Stripe.net is here. So we don't have to write all the code for Stripe. We've included the library, so now we can just call methods in the library. So step 1, add the keys. Step 2, install Stripe.net, either through the Visual Package Manager console, through the Manage NuGet Packages window or the Package Manager console, whichever way you want. Anybody having a problem so far, or are you with me? Are we okay to move on to our next step? So we've installed the package, we've added the API keys. So our next piece of setup has to do with our, close up a few of my files here. Don't really need. Oops. So in our shop controller, we're gonna need access to this secret key and publishable key. We're gonna need these in the payment view and methods we're gonna write. The challenge is in .NET Core, our controllers can't read the app settings values directly. In older versions of .NET we could, but in .NET Core it's kind of separated out. So we need an intermediate step. We need to configure our shopping cart controller so that it can read the configuration values from our app settings file. And the place we have to do this is through our startup file. So first I'm going to go to my shop controller. We're going to need to make a couple of changes here. So right now, whenever we make a call to our shop controller, what's happening here? Somebody explain this code from line kind of 17 down to 24. We didn't write any of this code. This was scaffolded. If we looked at any of our controllers, they all look like this at the top. Actually, I guess we didn't scaffold this controller, but we did scaffold. So here's our categories, right? We've got read only, and then we have this line of code. If we look in the product, right, it's using the database. So Justin, can you explain a little more about how it works? You're absolutely right that it's using the database. So why do we have this method that has the same name as our controller, and it has a parameter of type application DB context? You're absolutely right. Can somebody, or you, Justin, or anyone else, explain a little more how this is working? Right. So what this is using, and I'm going to put a note about this in our shop controller. So this controller uses dependency injection. It requires a DB connection object when it's created. Right? So whenever we create our shop controller, the controller has to be passed a database connection, right? The controller can't work without a database connection. It's the same for all our other controllers. Our categories controller requires it, and so does our products controller. So this code is all from the scaffolding. So these controllers cannot function if they don't receive a database connection object. Okay? So that's called dependency injection. If you think of how dependency injection works, it's like me saying to my daughter, hey, can you go to the store? Can you drive to the store and pick up some milk? I would need to give her the car keys in order for her to be able to do that. Right? So the car keys is that dependency. She can't drive to the store and buy something if I don't provide the keys. That's right. So here the database object is created, but whenever the controller is instantiated, it's called, it receives an existing database connection. So where does it come from? Diane, I think that's your question. It comes in startup. Here, whenever a service is called, this would include the controllers, it receives our DB context. So if there's anything our controllers need in order to work, in startup, we have to pass that object to the controllers for this dependency to work. It's a way of passing a required object to another object. So that's known as dependency injection. We use it in all kinds of different programming languages, not in .NET. So it's a way of determining at runtime, what does this object need, and making sure we provide it. So our controllers already use dependency injection. Right now, they take in an instance of a database connection. So why am I talking about all this? What does it have to do with Stripe payments? In order to read the keys from app settings, our controller also now needs a second object. It needs a configuration object. That configuration object can read appsettings.json or our secret keys. Without that configuration, our controllers have no access to the keys that it needs. So we're going to add configuration dependency needed to read Stripe keys So the class we need, it's an interface, it's called iConfiguration. And I'll use the same naming convention as Microsoft did for our other dependency. So typically the dependency names are prefixed with an underscore. I get an error here. So I've got to add this missing reference. It doesn't know what configuration means. So we're going to add Microsoft.extensions.configuration. And now I need to modify the constructor method, the code that happens every time we call our controller. So not only are we going to pass it an application DB context, but now we're also going to pass it an iConfiguration and then we're going to set this equal to our configuration. I'm going to put all this code up on Pastebin if you need it. So now our shop controller doesn't just have one dependency, it has two. It needs a database connection object, and it needs configuration, the configuration object from startup. So I will copy this to Pastebin and give you the link if you need it. And my display just went black. That's fun. Not quite sure what happened there. That was interesting. Did it go all black for you guys? My screen? Oh, okay. That's good. So this is the new code at the top of our shop controller. Good question, Liam. Not sure. And at the top, you also need to add the missing reference, which is Microsoft.extensions.configuration. So we added the reference on line 11, and I've modified this code. So we've done one half of the dependency injection piece for our controller. We've done the receiving part. So our controller can now accept a configuration object. We now have to do the sending part, and Diana, that comes back to your question, where do the objects get sent in? That's going to happen in the startup. Okay, so if it's the sound of two hands clapping, we've done the sound of one hand clapping so far. We've done the receiving, but we've got to do the other side. We have to do the sending. Okay, so the code you need, it's on Pastebin. We're going to add this reference on line 11, and we're modifying this code up at the top of our shop controller. Once you've got that, we can go to our startup file to do the sending part of this. So we'll go back to startup. And we just need to add one line of code in startup to pass the configuration info that includes everything in app settings into our controller here. So in startup, I can maybe put this down here after we enable sessions. Doesn't really matter where it goes. We want to inject configuration info so the shop controller can read API keys from appsettings.json. So there's a few different methods we could use for this. The simplest one is to use this one down here, add singleton. I won't get into the mechanics of how that all works. It's fairly complicated. So we're going to pass the configuration this one line should be all we need. Inside of configure services. So this is going to send a configuration object Okay, it's actually telling me I can simplify this, but I'll just leave it like this. We'll see if it runs. So there was our setup. We created our Stripe account with our API keys. We put the keys in appsettings.json. I know I'm being repetitive. That's deliberate. We installed the Stripe.net package. We modified our controller to accept a configuration object whenever it gets called. And then we passed in the configuration object here from our startup. So now we're ready to build the payment page and then write the code to process the payments to send to Stripe. So I'm going to go to my shop controller and I'll scroll down to the bottom. And just like we had two methods for checkout, a get that loaded the page and a post that processed it, we're going to have kind of two methods for doing the payment. So our first method will be a get method. It's going to be shop/payment. We're going to set the authorized decorator because you've got to be logged in to make a payment. So here's what we're going to do. We need to get the order from the session variable, right? So if you look at our code above, when we hit checkout last week, we were saving the order into a session variable called order with a capital O. So we now want to read back the order. We want to convert the total into cents. So when we send the payment to Stripe, one thing we'll notice if we go and read their documentation, so if we want to display the amount, actually, it's not that we've needed in cents here, but we want to display the amount of the order. So we'll have to fetch the order. Oops, I guess we'll say this. Fetch and display the order total to the customer. So we can use the view bag. Also use the view bag to set the publishable key, which we can read from the configuration. So if we look at the Stripe documentation in their HTML form, here's their example. The form needs to include the publishable key. So we're going to read that value from the configuration, and we're going to pass it to our view using the view bag. And then we can include it in the JavaScript that's here. And then we'll load the payment view. So we'll do this part and we'll build the view, and then we'll take a break. We'll deal with processing the payment afterwards. So we're going to call getObject. Actually, I'll do it this way first. So it wants to know what kind of object are we getting? An order object, and we called it order. So viewBag.total. So we want to take the amount of the order and pass it to the view in the view bag. Now we want to read the publishable key from the configuration. So we're going to call getSection Stripe. And then in there we had a value called publishable key. So that will give us Stripe publishable key value. So we've got two values in the view bag, the total of the order and the key we need to send in our payment form. I'll put this up on Pastebin. I'll hope my screen doesn't black out again. There's the link. So we're reading the order from the session, and we're getting the total, putting it in the view bag, and we're reading our key from our configuration, putting that in a separate variable in the view bag, and going to load our payment view. So what would our next step be? We've created this method, so what should we do next? Thank you, Farouk. Yeah, we need to make a view, and Maggie, you're right, called payment in our views shop folder. So we'll go to views and shop. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add, this will just be an empty view. We don't need any model. So just pick Razor View Empty, because most of the code here is actually JavaScript that we can literally copy and paste from the Stripe documentation. So We'll click Add an empty view, and I'll call it Payment so that it matches the name of our method. And it will get called automatically when we use the code return view. To create your payment view, now the code we need for this, we can actually copy and paste from Stripe. It's mostly JavaScript. So I'm going to go to this link, which is on Blackboard, but I'll put it in the chat as well. So make sure you open up this link, open up a browser tab to the Stripe documents for checkout. And make sure, like me, you click an HTML front end and a .NET back end. So these are buttons. So we can do React or HTML on the front and .NET or any one of these other 6 technologies on the back. So we want an HTML front end and a .NET back end. So it actually gives us a little preview here of what this might look like. And here, these are 4 tabs. So we've got Checkout, Success, Cancel, and Server. So click on the checkout.html. Just have to move my little camera window over. So click on Checkout. And for now, I'm going to copy everything. We'll take out the header and stuff because we want it to use our layout file. So copy everything. It's 52 lines. For the moment, we'll copy the whole thing. So click on the Checkout tab, and let's just click Copy. Paste in the whole thing. So most of this code is actually going to be fine. No problem. I'll put it up on Pastebin anyway. So you can copy it from there as well if that's easier, okay? So we should remove a few things, and then we need to make, I think, 3 or 4 small changes. What should we remove here, first of all? I'll save that. Okay, yeah, we will come to the key in a minute. Yes, Diana, I'll come back. Yep, we can replace the image. So let's replace the source of our image. So we can go to our images, logo. I'll set the alt tag as get me a game. And I'll change the H3. That also says, so it also says, maybe we'll just say this, your order total. So I'm going to change line 27. Start taking out all this white space, which is terrible. Oops. What else can we take out of here? If we want our payment page, yep. So we're going to have to replace this. So Diana, what should we say? Right now, this is hard-coded to say $20. You know what, I'm actually going to load this page. Why don't we look at it in the browser? Maybe that's a little easier. So I'll go back for a minute. Oops. Not sure where all my other tabs went. So I'll go back to my cart, put something in it. I'm already logged in, so I don't have to log in again. Okay, so it's right now it's just hard coded as $20 and I get a checkout. Maybe we don't really need the logo since we've got the logo right here. So maybe I'll get rid of the logo. What else should we change? What else do we need to change? So yeah, the total, right? My cart was $79.99, so that total's hard coded at $20. So we need to change that. We need to change the key. We could, but I've also got, if I view the page source, right, we've got all the HTML tags again. Yeah, so we don't need the head and body. You're right, Justin. We already have those things. So the Stripe documentation is assuming we need a full page top to bottom. We need these JavaScript links, but I don't need anything else. So I'm going to take out everything at the top. I'm going to take out the head and body. I'm going to remove the logo because the logo already shows up right above it. And I'm going to take out the closing body. I'll maybe add a class here. I'll maybe make the button just say continue to payment with a couple of arrows. And I'm just going to remove all the white space. You don't have to. I just find it's going to be more readable if I do. All this JavaScript we can basically leave as it is. This is coming right from Stripe. And I can take out the closing HTML. So we need to deal with the total and the key. So I have no head, no body. So what do we do with the total instead? How do we display the proper order total? We don't want to hard code it at $20. Here's the controller method that's calling this page. Yep, we've already got it from the order. And then where are we storing it? Yep, we're sending it already on this line. So where does the total live? Yes, we could, but what are we doing on line 178? Where are we storing the total on this line? Right, in the view bag. So we can replace this hard-coded value, you got it, Justin, with viewBag.total. I also want to format that as currency. So it doesn't just display a raw number. So I'll use string.format and put in our funky currency formatting. So take the total from the view bag, format it as currency. What about our publishable key? So we need to replace this value. Again, if we go back to the controller, how could we reference the key that's coming out of our app settings.json? You got it, Diana. We can use the view bag. So our page should be complete now. We're showing the total of our order, and we're using our own key rather than the sample that was hard-coded into the documents from Stripe. Other than that, we just took out the HTML we didn't need. So let's try that again. I'll put a couple items in my cart, and I want to verify that the cart total shows up accurately on the payment page. So I'll buy one of these and one of these. So my cart is $169.98. No, you can't. You can only pass one. That's why we're using the view bag. So it shows the total. And if I check my publishable key, should be in the JavaScript, which for me is PK test UUOO. If I check my app settings.json, that's the right publishable key. Okay, Diana, so we have two keys, a public and a private key. And all the API services work this way. The public key goes in the HTML. That's on the sending end. So users can always see that value, right? I can see it here in my source of my page. So the public key or the publishable key is visible. The secret key is for validating on the server end. So if we look at the code for the server, in here, we're going to have to read the secret key on the server side, right? You don't quite see it, but there it is here. So in the server, we read the secret key. They don't need to see it, Justin, but the Stripe API requires that it's being sent because it needs to know which application is sending this, which customer of Stripe is this coming from. So the users don't see it, right? It's not displayed, but it has to be included in the form. So they know, Stripe knows which store is this payment for, because Stripe has millions of customer stores. So it needs to know, the publishable key tells Stripe which store the payment is for. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, it's 12:01. We're going to take a break here. I'm going to upload my code to GitHub. And here's what I would like every one of you to do. Every single one of you, Get out of your chair. Get off your computer for 10 minutes. We've been sitting for an hour. We sit at the computer all day. Go stretch your legs, have a snack, use the bathroom, sing a song, do whatever you need to do. Just get out of your chair for 10 minutes. We will come back in 10 minutes. Yes. See you shortly.